did Zach just leave the bathroom?
He went to put it.
Oh, okay.
3 billion. Oh, sorry. You missed it.
Perfect. Great, so welcome to round 6 of Nationals, everyone. What I'll just start by doing is getting the adjudication panel to introduce themselves and their pronouns.
Hi everyone, I'm Zach. My preferred pronouns are he or they. Hi everyone, my name is Dale. My preferred pronouns are he or they.
Kia ora, my name's Megan. I use she, they pronouns.
Great, and then I'll just get each team to do their names and pronouns, starting with the affirmative team, Hawke's Bay.
My name's Ella. I'm the first speaker in reply. My pronouns are she, her.
I'm Isabella, I'm the second speaker and my pronouns are she, her.
Hi, my name is Bex. I'll be speaking third, and my pronouns are she, her.
Great, and then in the game team, Auckland White.
Hi, I'm Chris. First speaker in reply, pronouns are he, him.
I'm Julia, second speaker, pronouns are she, her.
I'm Sarah, third speaker, pronouns she, her.
Perfect. So if we're all good to go, the motion is this House would ban AI writing technology, for example, chatGPT, in secondary and tertiary schools. With that all done, let's welcome up the first speaker of the affirmative team to start their case.
You.
Before you start, could you look at each causing issues with putting the laptop there?
You put it here.
Put it there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You can put it so close to me. There we go.
You can put it in front of
It's got good audio anyway, but
Well, that might be the problem.
yeah. There we go. I'm not moving it. There we go.
Okay, we all set up. Everyone happy with the laptop placement? Okay. When we see AI proliferating, we become reliant on this harmful tech through our kids and are less likely to evolve as a society. Team Hawke's Bay tells you we simply can't stand for this and a ban is the best solution. 3 points on this. Firstly, the purpose of schools. Secondly, the quality of content produced. And thirdly, school community and cultures impacts with AI. Before I continue, 3 points of setup. Firstly, what does this ban look like? It looks like the website being banned on school Wi-Fi. It looks like the use of plagiarism checkers, like the one that CEO of ChatGPT created himself in order to see when this is being used. It looks like when students get caught being withdrawn from the standard, like other current things in place. Secondly, who does this apply to? This is going to apply to students. It's going to apply to teachers and professors. It's going to apply to people researching under universities. It's going to apply to administrative bodies. No one in the education system should be using AI. Thirdly, what does this technology look like? It looks like large language models that work in a generative way. It means it takes vast information available and is constantly becoming smarter. It looks like the current ChatGPT models we see. It looks like them being updated regularly, being able to create convincing essays and emotive writing. On to my first point about the purpose of schools. School is a place for the future generations of our society to receive an education. 3 points on why this is better without AI. Firstly, on the ability to critical think. School is a place to foster new ideas and gain a wide range of perspectives. It encourages students to learn a wide range of things and build their own opinions. This is seen most in literary subjects where this ChatGPT could be implemented, like history, like English, like media studies. This is important because it teaches students to question what they see when they are researching. It teaches them to create and form their own opinions. When AI exists, we see students just entering their topic and receiving a full essay back. This does not allow students to think about what's being produced in the same way as it does currently, because they have trust in their tool, because like I said, this is students using it. It's not people with a vast contextual knowledge of what is right and wrong. So what this means is our students are losing their critical thinking skills because they trust this tool. Secondly, on research, one major skill we learn under the status quo is the ability to research, right? This is key to employers and it is key for students' future in many areas because it allows them to consume the important things, right? Another key part of thinking critically is seeing research is it encourages us to find primary sources and sources that corroborate. We get to see which information is true and we can make this judgment ourselves. AI does not foster this behaviour because students just accept the information, right? It's a really easy thing to do and AI doesn't provide any incentive for them to keep looking like in other research places do, right? Thirdly, on originality. Humanities subjects and literacy are key for students because they teach you an opinion and to create new ideas. This is important in developed countries where tertiary industries are looking for students who can think on their feet and create new ideas, get that innovation. On the comparative, we see that AI is simply just plagiarism. Because AI runs by taking existing content from across the world and labelling it as its own and chucking it into a different puzzle piece, students can take these plagiarized ideas and then literally just copy and paste them without thinking twice, right? This is important because this is not originality. We see students don't think by themselves, they don't think about their own ideas, and we miss out on their true potential and what they can give back to society, right? After this point, we get kids with no soft skills, right? Where they can't think for themselves, and then that leads to us having a less productive workforce in the future. People are discouraged from creating new ideas, so we get a lack of innovation, and our society is likely to just stay stagnant. We see this as very important for constant evolution. I'll take a POI.
You said research skills will get worse, but don't you think ChatGPT is just another source? And considering it's pretty much inevitable, won't it be good for students to know how to use this within their school lives?
First of all, ChatGPT is very simple to use because it's marketed to students, right? They don't need to learn how to use this. But secondly, it doesn't foster the research like I've just explained, but I'll go over again because students don't have to go further, right? Under current research tools, they give them statements, they give them statistics, right? That students then have to implement, right, into their work. What ChatGPT does, it gives them the essay. They don't even have to change it around, right? On to my second point about the quality of content. The main idea of education institutions, and such we see in tertiary institutions, is research, right? So, how is this going to have flow-on effects when we see AI producing most of the work? Firstly, the perpetuation of misinformation. Because generative tech takes from across the web and doesn't have cognitive thought processes, it cannot separate false information from true information, especially if it's false information that's only been proved more recently when we see false information being online for a long period of time, right? So this means we get ChatGPT and other writing models not knowing the difference between an academic scholar's work or a piece of fan fiction, right? It has no ability to see the difference. It can't see what's true and what's not. This means that when people are writing research papers and using ChatGPT, if only for one paragraph, they can get misinformation, things that are just genuinely not true. What we see from this is it's damaging. When institutions are using this, it affects their reputation, which I'll go on to explain is really important. But we see that in misinformation in any capacity, whether they're using it as a tool to write another essay or whether they're just copy and pasting. This can only be perpetrated with AI as it doesn't involve with critical thinking like I've already discussed. Secondly, how we're going to regress in other creative writing and how this affects our society. Creative writing comes with something that's never been done before, the ideas of it, right? Shakespeare created a whole new language and made a culture shift with his work when he explained the human experience in a different ways, a way that was completely new, right? We lose these insights into human nature with AI because it cannot comprehend the human experience. We say that this needs to be preserved to ensure our society doesn't become stagnant. Thirdly, we see less diversity. ChatGPT takes popular knowledge because that's how it's modelled. It takes the things that are most common on the internet and it just puts these through again. This means that niche perspectives are not the ones getting published. They're not the ones getting information in this new world where our students are more likely to use AI. This means generalised content is being spat out over and over again without getting perspectives into any other way of life. On our side, people have incentives to research in different ways because they have to get an essay, right? So this also means that when people are going into writing careers, they're sharing unique experiences because it's what they know to write about in another way. This is important because we want opinion pieces, we want emotive work, because that's what humans connect to. That's how we get our society functioning how it does today. Academic research isn't a joke and when we don't use AI. We uphold good standards that don't perpetrate false information. This leads to universities not getting bad reputations, having to shut down, we're limiting access around. It also leads to less monolithic thinking and new ideas. We want our society to evolve, so vote F.
Great. I'd like to thank the speaker for their speech and now welcome up the first speaker from the gating team to start their case.
This debate does not exist in a world where AI either exists or doesn't. It exists in a world of rapidly developing AI and a clear and pressing need to teach students how to use the tools of the future, not regressively attempting to ban it. What would we model instead? Or what do we support? Two things. The first is that we obviously do not support a complete free use policy, as we don't support students using it to completely plagiarize their essays. We still broadly support things like in-school tests once in a while to check if writing looks completely different when submitted at home. However, we prefer a less punitive response that proposition gives us, where you just get withdrawn from the standard, you get extremely harsh punishments. We instead prefer leeway for first offenses to teach students how to use it. The second is, we uniquely support allowing students to do things like check their grammar, generate research, plan ideas, through integrating the use of AI into the curriculum. Okay, 3 points for the House. First, on the necessity of adapting to the inevitable. Second, on how this improves educational quality and future-proofing. Third, on how this improves educational equity. First, on the necessity of adapting to the inevitable. What is the context of AI in the status quo? Two things. The first, that is extremely prevalent now over the past year. This looks like the explosion of the net worth of companies like OpenAI and billions of dollars in investment in new technologies like Grammarly AI as well. Second is an extremely rapid evolution of this technology. This looks like it's taking years for GPT-3 to be developed, but only months for GPT-4 to come out. What this means is that AI is rapidly developing, and there is absolutely no way to put the genie back in the bottle. You cannot stop AI's rise, especially when technology gets its way. Billions of dollars of Silicon Valley funding is going to advance the technology. How did schools initially react then? They initially reacted like proposition. They were fearful and banned it in all of its instances out of growing concerns of plagiarism. However, the problem is that schools quickly realized the issue has become far broader than that, and the futility of policing it, the counterproductiveness had led many to stop. This looks like things like the International Baccalaureate, reversing course on its decision and allowing the use of generative AI tools as long as they are cited and properly referenced. Why do we think this is important? Okay. The advent of the calculator and things on the internet like Wikipedia similarly sent shockwaves down educational systems until they realized banning was bad and counterproductive. 3 points. The first, the inevitability. You cannot stop students from using calculator to check their math nowadays. You cannot stop people going on Wikipedia to find research. Second, the benefits these tools can have. These have obviously greatly expanded the ability for critical thinking, not restricted it. Because at the point you now allow students to do harder math problems with calculators, or allowing them to expand their research sources through exploring Wikipedia for other points of view, that is a good thing. We support that. I'll get onto that later about how AI does this. The final thing, though, is the comparative harms of banning AI as opposed to adapting to it, which I'll go into now. What are the harms of banning it? Two things. The first is that it pushes students to plagiarize, like proposition's telling us. Because at the point you don't know better, like more effective methods to use it effectively, you're forced to just plagiarize. This is important because it looks like things like asking ChatGPT to write an entire paragraph for you, instead of asking for help to refine your ideas, or prompt generation to see how you could plan planned and effective idea here based on the fact that you simply don't know how to generate a good prompt, don't know how to use AI effectively. The second is that schools don't teach things like the importance of checking research, which contests directly with what the proposition tells us about misinformation. It's just like things like schools used to teach that Wikipedia is always bad, to never use it, but of course students still use it anyway, and then that leading to the evolution of teaching to say Wikipedia is not necessarily bad, it is just a source of information, but you must check the sources. That is what we see educating students to use AI looking like. We also know that things like ChatGPT now have disclaimers about how all information is not necessarily accurate, encouraging students to check that. We think that students will do this. The reason for this is we don't think students are dumb or don't want to do work. We think they have time pressure or find it difficult to write or don't have the capacity to do so. We also fully think that students want to achieve highly. What does this mean? It means that in the status quo, the problem is that it's easier to wave the AI wand and get a bad essay than to get ideas for a better one. Why do we prefer inspiration over plagiarism through adaptation? Three things. The first is we see students having the desire to succeed. If they have registered in secondary education, in tertiary education, they probably want to succeed themselves. We think that's simple. Second is to say that you get better quality writing when you use your own writing in accordance with AI. Like prompts in themselves flagged, AI often writes surface level text. That means that it's often difficult to detect it. Finally, it allows for the development of other skills, like for in-class tests and your writing over there, and also research skills that we're going to. The impact is you are able to teach these things that you're unable to do in the comparative where you ban things. And we note here that it's literally impossible to detect AI in every instance. Things like ChatGPT 0 consistently fail now, and the arms race of AI means it will always be a battle to detect whether it is AI or not. You're not going to be able to do this indefinitely. Okay, second then on how this improves educational quality, which engages directly with the purpose of schools that prompt tells us. How do we think AI tools can help? Three things. The first, it can help you to acquire research that is often difficult to source, especially for students. The second, it helps you get plans and inspiration for your ideas that you may have but not be able to put into words. The final thing is you can use things like Grammarly AI as a grammar check to help you improve your style of writing and proficiency. Okay. Like a personal tutor in a pocket, we think this demonstrates critical thinking for two things. The first is you have to make these suggestions to AI in the first place. You have to articulate what your ideas are and then build on them in order to get a good essay. If you just say something really shallow to AI, it will give you something really shallow. You're going to get a bad grade for that assignment. We think students don't want that. The second is to say you have the opportunity to develop your own ideas. And we think this is a unique benefit of allowing things like ChatGPT to be taught in school using research skills so you can so that schools can actually teach you how to extract the best research, which the best sources are. It allows you to teach you to cite and go down the rabbit hole of research from what AI has given you, because what it gives you is a starting point and a reference point for many students who don't know what they're doing. Writing an essay is hard. Writing an essay with research is infinitely harder. We think AI helps you with that. The comparative is though, if you ban it, you lose this avenue and students are no longer able to develop these skills because they fundamentally find it easier to say, write a bad essay for me, than to say like, okay, give me some research, how can I expand on this research, how can I use it? Schools need to teach it. It's also more engaging and allows feedback, not just similar things like Grammarly AI, allowing students to improve their writing. We also think this allows future-proofing, because noting the fact that if you're in a secondary subject like history, English, or in a tertiary subject like law, you're probably entering an industry that is going to use AI as well. For instance, law is now using AI for proofing and for research as well. We think it's important for you to know these skills before you enter the profession, so you have a head start in this modern world. I'll take that point now.
Why does AI influence society?
I'm not, because it's powerful tool that we can use. I'm not sure the point of that point. Okay, finally then on educational equity. Contextually, why do richer students in the status quo get better achievement? We don't think it's because they're smarter. We think it's two things. The first is they have access to very expensive tutors. This looks like $120 an hour tutors that will basically say, well, help you edit your essay, when in reality they just write it for you, right? The second is they have better teachers and school resources, like school librarians who are able to help you delve into the research. These are things that are crucially lacked by poor students in the status quo. Comparatively, why do poor students then benefit from AI? Two things. The first is to say it is much cheaper to get AI. Even a subscription for GPT-4, no matter how expensive, is not going to be as expensive as $120 an hour for a good tutor. The second is you now have the ability to access similar tools like this research that librarians help generate. And we also note here that librarians are not always right either. They can give you false information, but they teach you to explore yourself, to find other sources, to ask other people. We think schools teaching the use of ChatGPT can do the same thing. The problem is, if you ban this, you leave these poor students without the support, without the ability to access these tools, and without the ability to know how to use them properly. That inspires them to plagiarize because they want to write a good essay, but they don't know where to start. Comparatively, schools actually teach them how you can use Grammarly AI to improve your writing style and fluidity. You can actually see your own improvement. We think they would do that. We think everyone deserves a chance to success. We think everyone wants that. We think they would use it properly. Proud to oppose.
Great. I thank the speaker for their speech, and now welcome up the second speaker of the podium team.
The NEG thinks that AI can be trusted in the hands of students. Students with their underdeveloped minds who are simply looking for the quickest way to pump out an essay. A couple of things I'll be addressing in my rebuttal before I move on to my point about the community and culture and what AI is doing to this. Firstly, I will be touching on what students are actually using AI for and how it is different as a tool. Secondly, I'll be talking about what does the ban actually do and how does it fix all of these things, the harms that we have been discussing. Then I'll move on to discussing thirdly about the harms in the future that the negating team was bringing up. And then lastly, talking about misinformation that we think is an extremely important harm in this debate for the youth. But firstly, I'd just like to touch on their model and how they, in their model, they basically said that they're going to allow students to as a leeway the first time to be able to learn how to use it. Why does this simply not work? Firstly, we think that allowing students to just use it the first time and then banning it afterwards is extremely similar to our model, which means that they accept that there are huge harms to it and they accept a lot of our case. And it just minimises a lot of the benefits that they're actually going to be getting on their side of the house. Moving on to my point about how students are actually going to be using AI and how it's unique as a tool. So what are they going to be using it for? We heard from the first NEG that they're going to be using it for style and grammar. Why isn't this true? Well, they agree that students are time pressured. What else are they? Students also care about socialising. They're youth. They've got friends. They don't care about the essay sitting back home that is due for the credits that they're only going to be caring about right at the end of the year. It's not imminent. They do not care. What does this mean? This means that they're looking for the quickest way to just pump out an essay. They're not going to spend and waste their time writing an entire essay before putting it through a Grammarly checker. Instead, what we think they're going to be doing, we think that they're just going to be putting in the prompt, putting in whatever the brief they've been given is from their English teacher into an AI chatbot and just simply copy and pasting it. This is so harmful because we see that we're lacking the critical thinking skills, lacking the creativity, lacking the diversity of opinions that we get when students are actually writing their own pieces. And secondly, they told you students are going to be using AI and as a way to learn how to cite AI. Why does this just not make sense? Firstly, we tell you that AI is coming from a wide range of sources, right? So it's pulling from literally millions of pieces of work. So when you say that students are going to be learning to cite AI, how is this even going to be possible? Are they going to somehow magically be able to cite every single million piece of thesis article that this AI has pulled from? It's not possible. It's not actually referencing. And we're just going to be lying to students saying oh yeah, you're referencing an AI. No, you're plagiarizing AI. And then nextly on how is AI unique as a tool? So they told us that basically it's like a calculator and we allow students to use calculators to test their work, so why wouldn't we use AI? Well, firstly, we think the difference is that like when you're using a calculator, you're using it to like check your work. You already know the basic methods. If we take, for example, things like algebra, calculus that you're doing in mathematics, like a calculator is just to double check that you haven't somehow messed up 1 + 1. What is difference here? The difference is that AI is literally doing the entire essay for you. It is, you're not using your own thinking skills beforehand. You're not using it as like a double checker. And also, it just means that our students get lazy. They get lazy in the work that they're doing, and quality just decreases. If they're talking about the workforce and how like in the future AI is going to be important, what's important? Students not being lazy, not actually being able to do their work at all. Moving on to what does a ban do? They basically told us that a ban is useless because we're not going to be able to detect everything and AI is constantly changing. We provided you with like 3 reasons at first and right from our model. Here's a few more. Firstly, we tell you pen and paper drafts. We already use this today in our society. Write your draft down on paper and then you can go and edit it later. This completely removes the ability for AI to actually write your essay in the first place. That works on our side of the house. Secondly, we tell you roboticness. AI is extremely easy to detect. If you have like a 12-year-old using big words or like exact sentence structure, a teacher's going to be thinking, yeah, that's not right. My student's been failing this whole year and now all of a sudden they're using words that they didn't even know. Obviously, they're going to be able to detect this. This means that a ban is effective, which means we're able to prevent all of the harms that AI brings that we outlined at first. Moving on to like what AI is going to be used for in the future. They told us that like AI is useful in the future and kids need to learn about it now. Firstly, we tell you that like being able to use it in the future, you're not going to actually be able to learn it. Like as we like said in Ella to a great response to a POI, like AI isn't actually going to be able to like, you don't need to learn how to use it. You're just putting in a prompt. It's that simple. Secondly, we tell you that like in the future, what are the skills that actually matter? We think being able to use AI isn't something that law firms are looking for when they're hiring. What are they looking for? They're looking for the ability to communicate. They're looking for empathy. Like empathy can be developed through like creativity and like writing and forming your own opinions. This is the skills that matter. This is the skills that employers are looking for. They just do not get this on their side of the house. And then like moving on to misinformation, which we think like went highly unresponded for, given we provided you with great reasons about like how universities rely on research, and research is a huge part of their model, and like they get huge amounts of funding from governments in order to just like do specific research. Governments want this research to be accurate, surely, and we provided to you why it isn't. So what do they tell us about like about how it is actually going to be accurate? So they tell us, well, they provide you with a tag on ChatGPT. This is going to mean that people know it's inaccurate. Why doesn't this work? It doesn't work because firstly we think like kids don't care. I've already explained to you their incentives. One of their incentives is not realizing whether or not it's accurate. Secondly, if we're looking at like professors and stuff who are going to be like, if we're looking at like research students or whatever who are going to be using this, we think that like already if they're going to be using it, as we've earlier explained, because it's easy, they don't care if it's going to be accurate. And then furthermore, on like the checking for your sources, I've gone over this. I've told you there's so many sources available. It is impossible to be able to do this when you're using AI. It's simply going to be inaccurate, and it's simply going to be perpetuating extremely harmful content through our extremely important universities. Moving on to my point about community and culture. So for consultant context, as we explained from first, AI can be used and can have impacts not only from the students, but from our staff and our community themselves. A couple of reasons for this. Firstly, we see like outreach. So we think that like the schools are integral in communities. Kids attend them, parents are involved in them. But we think that AI is harming this relationship. This is because there is no standard when we don't ban it for using or not using AI. Take, for example, the American University, where we had staff using AI to send emails to parents following a mass shooting. What does this show? It shows that staff are prioritizing efficiency over real relationships with parents. In these extremely important scenarios, when you need to be delivering a clear message and an empathetic message to parents, staff aren't doing it, and a ban will fix this. Secondly, we tell you teachers marking. If it's not only students using it, is it also going to be teachers using AI to mark writing being produced with AI? This is simply preposterous. Why is this? Because we think when we're having AI marking AI, it's what is actually the purpose of humans in this society then. We think that our purpose
science just devolves and we become reliant. It means that the creativity and the things that make us unique, such as our empathy, our creativity that we have explained to you down the line very clearly so far, just become irrelevant. And thirdly, we tell you that the parents just become disconnected because they can't help their students. The role of parenting with homework or whatever just gets devolved to AI. Ultimately, Hawke's Bay tells you that AI simply cannot be allowed to continue to be used in schools.
Great. I'd like to thank the speaker for their speech, and now welcome up the second speakers in the gaming team.
Athos taught us over and over again that kids don't care. Kids just want to be off playing with their friends. They don't really care about education. They simply don't like to engage with it. Then they assert that the comparative is that people learn how to write beautifully, people dedicate so much time and effort into beautiful essays, beautiful essay plans, they spend all this time learning. These two things simply don't match up. We tell you much more realistically, the comparative is that people simply don't do this learning. And what we prefer is that we adapt to all of these inevitable changes and we teach people how to do this work and we encourage people to engage. 3 things to talk about today. First, on just some general characterization. Second, on the impact on education. And third, on the wider impact that this has on society. Okay, first on characterization. Okay, just want to clarify what we really support. We had some discussion on what we really support and ideas about like bans and stuff like that. Well, what the point of that point is that teachers are generally going to adapt to this AI being used in these classrooms, right? Teachers are going to have rules. Teachers are going to have structures. Teachers are not just going to be allowed, and completely allowing to use it for everything. Teachers are going to have some critical thought about like how this improves the education process. We've already talked to you about that. Okay, on the purpose of schools, we heard from Athens. The purpose of schools is purely like to develop critical thinking, and yes, that is a hugely important part of schools, and yes, we will develop critical thinking. However, the main purpose of schools is to prepare people for life. This is why they teach things like critical thinking, right? Schools are set up to have this huge influence on children from when they are very, very young, right? Because to make them functioning members of society, and teachers, parents, everyone around these kids want to make them these functioning members of society. They want to prepare them for life, and to do this, they try and teach them critical thinking. We taught you at Kristen some relevant response that that this is going to much more effectively prepare people for life. We tell you this is the most important purpose of schools and encompassed by critical thinking, and this is what we went on. Okay, now on students' motivations. Okay, Chris told you that students want good grades, students want to do well. App came back and they said, well, students are busy, they have friends, they don't care at all. However, this completely ignores the fact that school is such a huge essential part of society. If people simply did not care about school and would hang out with their friends, why would they even go to school? How would it function? Then that you can only force children to do so much, right? School is incredibly important in children's lives for many reasons. Yes, maybe they don't have as developed brains until they're 25 or whatever, but people can still look into the future and want good things for themselves, right? They don't necessarily want to sacrifice their life to never having things like never having a good job. All of societal messaging, things like movies, things like people's parents, they want the best for their kids. They tell them school's important. They tell them do well in school, get good grades so that you can do well in school. So we think that is incredibly realistic. I think that kids do care about the school, and we see this. However, first of all, this doesn't engage with the comparative, right? Because as I already told you in my intro, if realistically, kids are much more likely to just simply not do anything if they don't have this more accessible source, which I will continue later. Okay. Also, just to quickly clarify what we mean by things like citing AI, this is absolutely possible. It's absolutely impossible for AI to be completely integrated with, we've heard, how do you even quote that? You quote that by saying, this was generated by ChatGPT. This was my prompt. That's how that works, and it's completely doable. Okay, we've also had some discussion on AI is detectable. We came up at first half and we heard, okay, these pieces are emotive, they're convincing, this is a danger, this is like terrible. But then we heard, actually, no, they're super shallow. However, we did actually give you reasons at Chris that why it is likely that these we already told you that this AI is likely to be detectable. Things like competition, things like the massive rapid rise, because clearly people are using it, clearly people are finding it useful, right? And as the purpose of this AI is to be used in everyday life, it is to be function as writing. They agreed it's targeted at school kids. It's going to continue to become more and more detectable. Also, if it's completely undetectable and completely really bad, then like it falls out of the debate, because if it's really really bad, these kids have absolutely no incentive to use it. They have no incentive to use it for these things. Okay, moving on to the impact on education, which is incredibly important for children. Okay, how does that help kids to think critically? ChatGPT, we already told you that ChatGPT works off opinions and prompts and stuff like that. But like more specifically, it's important to note that classes have specific requirements, right? If you don't take a class called like English, especially in university, classes teach specific things, they teach specific units. You can't teach the entirety of human knowledge, right? So you narrow it down into specific units, specific ideas, and that is what is assessed, because in order to assess students, compare them, stuff like that, schools have to have systems where they test on certain things. Therefore, to meet these specific requirements, you have to put in a specific prompt, right? Because I already told you have to put in a specific prompt, and this means that you have to put that critical thinking into ensuring that you have, you understand the ideas in class, and that is show it in your writing, right? Because you can tell if a teacher talks about like the same thing every couple of weeks, and then you have an essay on a completely different aspect of this novel that you're studying, a completely different theme, something you haven't talked about at all. Obviously, that's not really the point of that essay, and obviously the teacher is going to be able to detect that you're not really paying attention in class, you're not really engaging with the material, and is going to pull you out on that, and it's unlikely to lead to good grades. We've already completely. We've also proven that you still need like the research and stuff like that, because we never really got any actual reason why something like Wikipedia is so entirely different from ChatGPT, and we never really got any reason why you can't just go home and use ChatGPT for this reason. They told us that things like Wikipedia give you this huge incentive to go off and find another source, right? But they never told you what this incentive is, where it comes from, why it has this incentive. Wikipedia does not have like a massive banner on it saying find other sources where bad. Neither does ChatGPT, it's completely symmetric. However, however, under our side of the house, it's actually you are likely to gain this incentive, right? Because the moment you are accepting it in schools, the moment teachers are incentivized to talk about this, the more likely teachers are to actually discuss the impacts of these things, right? The more people are using these kind of sources in class, the more teachers are going to talk about the harms, the benefits, the harms and the benefits and stuff like that, and actually give the students reasons why they need these primary sources, and they're more likely to assess them on primary sources and ask them to actually find those primary sources. We also heard that it's important that you need the skill of changing things around. However, changing things around doesn't necessarily inherently teach you anything. We didn't get any analysis there. Okay, we also heard that ChatGPT is very, very simple to use, but this has already been spoken by the prompt stuff. Okay, how does this teach you how to? I'll take it here right now.
Where do students actually learn life skills?
In school. Okay, it helps in life. Helps in life. People want original. Okay, yeah. Okay. So I've already, as I've proven that this critical thinking is as benefit these students. This therefore takes all those benefits that both sides of the house have talked about kids just generally being more critical thinking, but also we can retain the benefits of this being really, really useful in jobs and things like talking to people, emails. These things are all really, really important. Okay, moving into the impact on society. We've heard that, first of all, this is largely irrelevant, right? Because we told you these AIs exist on either side of the house. However, just quickly on writing in new ideas, Shakespeare stole all of his work. Human writing is not from other stories. Things are not necessarily need to be 100% original to provide increasing value to society. And we can, and as Chris has said, they never really responded to the idea that once you actually, we heard what is the point if you're not doing all the marking? If you're not doing all this marking, if you're not doing all these stupid things, wasting this time, you can actually have more space for real human development. Okay.
Right, I'd like to thank the speaker for this speech, and now welcome up the third speaker of the family team.
Our path to victory in today's debate was to prove to you how individuality and actually having a diverse range of opinions is going to accelerate society forward both in the workplace and accelerate student success. They came back at this and tried to tell us if everyone has sort of equal opportunities and equal prompts, they would succeed better, however failed to grapple with the reality that it is not an equitable system, just an equal system that now prioritises those who are able to come up with the most clever one-liner. 3 points of clash in today's debate. Firstly, how do students engage with AI? Secondly, the prospects of AI in the workforce, and thirdly, the spread of misinformation and citing sources. Okay, first point of clash about how do students engage with AI. We gave you a very good characterization down the line that we believe the education system is very grade-based. We believe people are going to be using AI in order to get the highest grade possible, therefore eradicating a lot of original thinking. If we are able to prove this point is true and that students are going to be using this with malice intent, we win on the fact that students are no longer going to be engaging with their brains and no longer learning and thinking for themselves. How do they do that, right? They want to say students are going to check their references. 3 responses to this. Firstly, we told you students are time poor. We think a lot of them, and especially dire circumstances, might be working a job, maybe even 2. They just want to get the grade in order for them to pass. We aren't even looking at university at this point. We're just looking at people who want to get the baseline for achievement, and they're going to be using ChatGPT, which eliminates their chances to do this, right? Secondly, we don't understand why they need to be checking sources, right? Because teachers don't get the same trust and respect when they do this. Thirdly, it's physically impossible to cite from the hundreds of sources ChatGPT has. Why is this? Because in one paragraph, ChatGPT, or AI like ChatGPT, could be using millions of sources. They could be using a different source for every word or every sentence for all we know, and it's just because they're just using all this information to craft things that look somewhat original, which is why they're going to be using a large base of things. This is going to be impossible for them to learn how to check references. It's important for students to learn this skill because it allows them to discern from sources that might be reliable from sources that might not be. As we gave you an example, our checking primary and secondary sources and how they're different. They also want to try and claim here that it's going to be inevitable in school anyways, and they use the example of the calculator. Isabella already gave you a very good reason why calculators are a very different example, right? Because they teach you things, they do not teach you the formula, they don't teach you the analysis, they don't teach you the specific examples, don't need to go over that again, right? But I think this is a really important point in today's debate because the inevitability of ChatGPT is going to mean the normalization of it within school, right? And we think that's going to be a lot more harmful because when we see essays that are being produced with ChatGPT, people and they want to try and claim that people are going to cite their sources. Teachers are going to just get lazy. They'll be like, oh no, I taught my students how to cite their sources. And I have these hundreds of essays and hundreds of sources to check through. I saw the APA referencing. I'm sure it's fine. Teachers are time poor. They're not going to want to go through the hundreds of sorted resources, right? Then they wanted to try and claim that it's going to give students equitable opportunities because under the status quo, rich people have things like tutors. It allows people to it allows poor people to succeed. Firstly, right, we don't think ChatGPT is a great way to succeed. It does not know the specific achievement criteria for a lot of standards. Let's take English, for example. They have specific reading comprehension standards, especially in essay writing, how you formulate a certain idea. Maybe it's very specific to your knowledge of a certain subject or things like that. We believe that it's not something ChatGPT can emulate because it does not know the criteria in which your thing is being marked on, right? If you were to look at if a teacher was to implore students to look at past papers, maybe look at other students' work, they're able to see the criteria and better achieve on exams and such. Secondly, right, if everyone has access to it, as I flagged in my intro, it's no longer equitable, it is just equal, right? Why is this important in today's debate? It's because the question now becomes, what is going to make students stand out on job applications? It is going to be how creative and individualistic you are. You cannot put a price tag on how creative or how critical thinking you are. That is something you learn through discipline. That is something you learn from being taught within schools, and we have told you why teachers are the best reason to be doing this. We want to give people that chance, right?
Point.
So onto the point about they can still have critical thinking because they can put in a creative prompt. Really weird analysis from this side, right? Because creating a one-sentence prompt to put in an AI is not a whole lot of work, and we believe that skills such as discipline are also, if they want to try and claim that that's critical thinking, good for them, but we believe it's not, simply because it takes you maybe like 10 seconds to think of a prompt that's slightly smartly worded, right? But even if you are losing skills like discipline, you are losing skills like time management, which are very valuable to employers, even in a world that AI is being perpetuated in. At the end of this point, what have we proved? We have proved that when we have students using AI, they're going to do it with malice, not necessarily malice intent, but the intention to pass and get the grade that they need, and that's why we win there. Right, yes, I'll take my PI.
You mentioned earlier that students want the highest grade probably, but at first and second that AI generates only basic writing. Doesn't that further the likelihood that students won't use it to plagiarize, but to research or ideate their own writing?
We believe that students who are like just below the pass-fail mark are probably going to use this in order to get them above to that grade. We don't see how that analysis really applies here, right? Secondly, about how AI is going to be in the future of like the workforce, right? They want to try and say they're going to be future-proofing for their future career, right? But we believe that yeah, sure, like your ability to use AI is not going to dictate how you do in the workforce. Why is this? It's because AI generative technology is incredibly user-friendly. We told you it's marketed this way because it allows many consumers to use it. But secondly, we believe it's like, as we've told you, that they want to claim it's accessible, they need to also work on the grounds that everyone can use it and they don't really need to learn how to use it. Therefore, using it in the school is kind of irrelevant, because if everyone can use it regardless of like intelligence level, you aren't really learning anything in school, right? We believe that if you want to learn how to adapt to generative technology, you would learn that in a scientific subject out of the scope of today's debate, right? But let's take them at their best. Let's say that hypothetically you could like learn how to adapt to this AI that's difficult during these subjects, right? How do we still win? We still win because we are able to have people thinking outside the scope of the ideas that AI generation brings in, right? What does this look like? This looks like, if there are examples for lawyers, or an example of like AI being used in the law firm to like sift through papers, right? We believe that when you have people in the workforce who are able to like double check and interact with their AI in a way that is productive because they are using their different knowledge, because they're no longer monolithic thinking. We believe they are able to further progress the knowledge of their AI because they're like, okay, I know what the strengths and weaknesses of this technology is, but not because I had it in school. It was because I learned in school how to be creative and how to think actually critically. At the end of this debate, who was the team that brought you actual reasons as to why the structure of AI does not promote any sort of critical analysis from students or academics? It was Team Hawke's Bay. Please vote affirmative.
Alright, I'd like to thank the speaker for their speech and welcome out the third speaker of the negating team.
AI is growing exponentially and is getting gradually more and more difficult to detect what is AI generated and what is actually authentic. We think it's best because this is a symmetric truth on both sides of the house. So therefore we think it's best to incentivize students and teachers to best use it within their daily lives. For things like research, things like Grammarly AI, we think it's an acceptable truth that on both sides it's going to grow and get more permeable, permeates our society. We think it's best that we actually adapt to it, that we actually get the best educational outcomes. A few things during my speech. First of all, two broad themes, education and job opportunities. And within this, I'll go through a couple of questions. Okay, first of all, they told us that students would want
to have like the quickest way to pump out an essay. They just copy paste these essays, and so therefore now suddenly they'll lack critical thinking. Hold on, if they want to characterize students as so lazy they'd entirely plagiarize something, two responses. First of all, they'd probably likely plagiarize like a whole other thing, like a Wikipedia or just another essay they found online, symmetric. Second of all, they probably would spend, or alternatively, they just spend their limited time trying to gather the most rudimentary level of understanding. For example, if you need to write an essay on the causes of World War II, you probably plagiarize it or like barely reach an actual level of understanding because you're so very lazy. So what do we get on the comparative? We actually get a starting level of knowledge. So it's not so daunting all of a sudden you have to write an essay. You get a basic level of understanding. So now you gain that level of understanding to build off of, and now you have that extra time to delve further. They told us the constraints on students was time. So we can tell you at the point they can quickly get a generalized understanding, they're not so daunted. Now they have time to delve further. When everyone in the class has that same ability to reach that base level, now we uplift the whole standard, because now to get those top marks, to actually pass, you have to think a bit more. To get like students would go further and actually get more intensity and focus on new ideas, time to research more, or like even just develop your own ideas. We think this is a really, really good thing. Then at third, they decided to tell us that students would want the highest grade possible. We tell you, yeah, okay, this is good. But then they told us that actually ChatGPT doesn't fit into the criteria for school. We think this is really good for our case, because that means you can't just have ChatGPT write a whole essay for you. But even if you did, like, okay, whatever, but then it doesn't fit into those niche categories and those niche criteria. So you're going to have to manipulate it. You're going to have to intervene with it. You're going to have to change it into your thing. This is just like any other piece of research, whether you're looking at like history.com or anything else. And okay, even if we listen to their contradiction, that students just want to pass, which they kind of just went back and forth, we characterize students strongly and we give reasons why they would want to do well. But even if they would want to plagiarize, we told you they plagiarize anyway, but at least we get that greater standard of knowledge, greater actually like barriers to get a good grade, greater barriers to pass, and ChatGPT doesn't fill those criteria that they wanted to tell you, so basically we just get smarter students. Now, second question, which side of the house actually gets research skills? First response, ChatGPT is a research source. We think gathering info from it is another form of research in real life. This is just another source. So at Chris, we told you that because it exists, and it continues to exist, it'll just be another integral source for research. We think this is massive direct benefits because you effectively learn to utilize just another part of research, like how to input things. They told us it was easy, but actually it's quite a particular process. But we also think that when you see an output, you might want to, you'd have that direction of output and like what you would want to build off of. But we also think that you see how you can make things unique, how you can make things yours. And also at the point you get a general overview, you can delve more into research. At that point you have more time, particularly because the whole concern was students are really time deficient. But we also think that you get to extend and excel yourself. Then they tell us that AI actually doesn't provide any incentives to keep looking at information. Like, this makes no sense. It's also just because it gives you the answers. Well, at the point you have that baseline level of understanding, you probably have the time to go further, the time to get better grades. But we also think that they told us that AI runs by taking content into it, and so we see it. We think this is the equivalent to other research sources, which also takes other people's content that we look at and we see. We think we can still get critical thinking at the point everyone concedes that it's pretty basic information that AI isn't perfect. Then they told us that AI was simple and robotic. Well, this is really good for our side of the house because the students would naturally want to write better, naturally want to take this and make it better. But in future, at the point that it does get indetectable, we actually can't efficiently ban it. It doesn't work. At the point, you literally cannot tell what is AI generated, what is not. At the point, it is exponentially getting better. We think it's better for students to have the capacity and have the ability to do this. But also, another response, at the point you ban something, it's a lot more alluring for students to use sneakily. We think if you say, you know what, you can use it, just quote it. You know, it's a lot better if you just quote it. Students are more comfortable to be like, okay, I use ChatGPT, but I can quote it and now I can make it mine. Rather than be like, oh, okay, I'm not allowed to use it. Might as well screw the rules now. I can just put the whole thing in. Okay, second question. Which side of the house gets diverse views? We think that diverse views actually get way better on our side of the house, which is actually a flip. We think that at the point everyone has like a sufficient understanding of a topic, now things that are more niche get heard the most, get the most attention. Because at the point, let's say you wanted to learn about the civil rights movement, and now you don't really know much about it. It takes you ages as a student to actually get a baseline level of understanding. But at the point you kind of have a quick generalized overview, you can be like, okay, how do I make my essay better? How do I make it like delve further now that I have all this free time? You can be like, okay, let's look at this minority voice, let's look at this diverse voice, because at the point you have a baseline level of understanding, you have more capacity to actually go further, listen to those diverse views. At the point, that's what makes your essay distinct, that's what makes it better. But at the point, it's just more interesting because now you actually know what's going on, and you can have that critical thinking at that point. This was their only path to victory. They literally conceded. So it just proved that diversity and education literally gets better. Then they told us that ChatGPT takes popular information. But this is precisely true. We think that it has a generalized ability to have a baseline piece of information, but you can go further. And at the point it's popular, it's probably getting more and more accurate by the day. At the point it has those feedback mechanisms where you literally, people can make responses like, hey, this was not true, and it gets better and better by the day. We think every day it's literally getting more accurate, but it's still a good baseline level of understanding, which exponentially makes education a lot better. Then they told us, miscellaneously, on creative writing. They told us that ChatGPT cannot comprehend human experiences, so creative writing will get worse. Okay, first of all, this is really, really good, because if it cannot comprehend uniquely that human experience, then we think creative writing gets more effective on our side of the house. At the point people will still crave people's natural, creative writings. We think it still gets really good on our side of the house. This is actually a flip of that, because at the point ChatGPT can write like a robot, we think creative writing gets more attention on our side of the house, because that is the unique benefit. Okay, then they told us on misinformation, that ChatGPT can't separate false and true information. 4 responses. First of all, this is already known. Everyone knows this. So they would actually want to double check and actually have that critical thinking at the point they're worried that it's not true. But here's the comparative, right? A student without ChatGPT might accidentally stumble on a website when they're researching and end up with something radically wrong, something completely polarized, and they don't really know what they're getting into. They're completely warped. But at least on our side of the house, we have a holistic general overview, which is more likely to be accurate, and then go further. So I think that first of all, they have that feedback to make it more accurate, and second of all, false information exists on App 2, but far worse at the point you're not really sure where you are. You don't have any baseline understanding. You don't have that holistic. Usually ChatGPT gives you a couple viewpoints at one time. Then they told us universities will have reputational harms on research. If it has reputational harms, then it won't do this. I think universities naturally have that incentive to bring new ideas. We still get new ideas on our side of the house. Then on critical thinking, they told us people won't question what they see. Well, what's different to ChatGPT to other sources? You look at sources, you want to see what they're like. You see a source online and you think about it. You see ChatGPT online, you'll still think about it. We don't think at the point you log into ChatGPT, your brain suddenly explodes. We have way better critical thinking at the point. We can still have school tests that we told you, Chris. You have more time to research. Diverse views are more heard at the point. You have a baseline understanding, you know what's going on. You're like, okay, I want to hear some actually interesting stuff because all my other classmates know the same storyline about the Civil War as me. How do I make my essay distinct? How do I make my essay go further than the baseline? Because otherwise you're a lazy student. If you are lazy, then you just spend all your time trying to get a baseline understanding. Then on jobs. We think jobs, if you want creativity, this is really good for our side of the house because first of all, creativity gets better at the point everyone has more understanding, more knowledge, but also if you use ChatGPT to be creative, you're probably not that creative, you probably don't deserve to be hired, but we think efficiency gets better on our side of the house, but also your ability to get into the workforce. People literally are judged on whether or not they can use Excel. I think ChatGPT and efficiency is really good there. And also about that school shooting thing, we think the school probably is going through a really difficult time. It's just another way for them to communicate. We think it's really important that we have this in our lives, we have ability to adapt to it, and we actually get best outcomes for students and society as a whole. Thank you.
Alright, I'd like to thank the speaker for the speech, and as is customary, welcome up the negating team to the
key observation in this debate is that proposition's harms are contingent, that students are either dumb or don't know better. We think they said they don't know better. We think we improve that on our side of the house. 3 issues. First, on what the world looks like now. Second, on what teaching students to use these tools would look like. Finally, the broader societal effects on jobs and equity. First then, on what the world looks like now. It's important to characterize this because it's the basis of the comparative that the debate exists in. What do we hear from SciProp? We heard that they want to do punitive measures to restrict the use of ChatGPT in all school, looking like things like banning it on school property so that you can't use it during school hours. And that would somehow be sufficient to reduce the incentives to cheat, that they would be able to stop all cheating. What response did we give you? We gave you, first of all, that it's incredibly difficult to stop ChatGPT generated writing, and the point the technology is developing so exponentially, and that was never contested. That means that it is always going to be better, and you are going to be in an arms race to try and detect the technology. It means that you are never going to be able to do it accurately. There are going to be instances of false detection. You're not going to be able to accurately assess when it is generative writing, when it isn't. That is harmful. But the second layer of response here is to say that it means the comparative is a world where you either have this technology and just attempt to not use it, worsening educational quality, or you actually attempt to fold it into the curriculum. We told you that because the world looks like one where AI is going to continue to infinitely improve, that schools should leverage this instead of trying to punitively restrict it, because they can't punitively restrict it, and they aren't going to be able to do so in any way. Because if all the incentives they tell us about time pressure are true, it means that students will always have an incentive to use these generative tools, especially if they think they aren't going to be caught. We prefer them, therefore, to use them to write better essays as opposed to writing shallow essays as proposition gives us. Okay, what then does teaching students to use these tools look like? It's important to note this because they don't engage with how we actually improve the status quo. What did they say? They say that it would be bad because it would mean that students are able to use things like research, they won't check their sources, they will just copy and paste it. But the key thing to note here is this is the symmetric harm on the status quo. That is to say, that is what's happening right now, and that is what we are going to change. We change this through, like I told you at first, having teachers teach people to actually check the research sources of ChatGPT, through having this baseline knowledge, and then going and further expanding on it. We teach students to input their plans, outlines into the tools like Grammarly AI to see areas where they can improve their writing and actually improve the quality of education they receive. And we think this is likely because, as we told you, these students want to achieve, given the fact that they have registered at these tertiary institutions, given the fact that, as proposition claims, they want to get the highest grade possible, because they concede the fact that this writing is probably going to be basic, it means that basic writing is not going to get you anywhere. Like we told you at second and third then, means that if you add onto this through your own research, through your own creative flair, means you actually are able to develop better writing. The problem in the status quo is that students can't do this because they fear they will receive retribution if they use these tools that are very beneficial to their research skills, to their future lives, to their ability to think creatively. We would give schools the capacity to teach this as opposed to just trying to ban something that cannot be banned. I remind you of how exponentially fast AI is growing. Finally then, on the broader societal effects on jobs and equity. Okay, two things. The first thing we said was that it allows schools and students to develop these skills that will need for later life, particularly noting the most writing-heavy subjects like law, like English, will probably lead to careers that are also writing-heavy and likely to use these tools, like, for instance, proofing. It's not about the fact that, we don't want them to use it. It's about the fact that these industries are probably going to, and therefore, students should learn these skills. But also, there's a point on equity here that was never adequately addressed by side proposition. That's to say, we gave you reasons why these richer students tend to achieve better in the status quo. And if you give them give poorer students an alternative to access a cheaper means to, for instance, know which grammatical techniques are good, know how to do research that rich students have tutors to help them do, they are able to achieve at a higher level. This was never engaged with, and it's crucially important because it's always going to be more accessible than a $120 an hour tutor. Proud to oppose.
Right, I thank the speaker for the speech and welcome up the reply.
To win this debate, we have to prove that the harms that come with ChatGPT don't outweigh the benefit that comes with it as a tool. Right, so starting off, I'd like to talk about how I defined our world at the start of the debate. Firstly, the clarification is about plagiarism checkers. We told you that ChatGPT themselves has created a way so that you can check when students are using ChatGPT. It is possible to monitor it. This is key in our debate because it means that we can make an effective ban on ChatGPT and we can restrict its use in schools, meaning and teachers can teach the soft skills that AI cannot. So, also I'd like to talk about the other tools available outside of ChatGPT. We told you at first and at second as well, but the main push from the negating team is that ChatGPT can be used as a tool. We explained that other tools exist, right? We have Wikipedia like they brought up. We have Google like we brought up. These are the tools that students should be using because they can use critical thinking alongside, right? if students aren't going to use a ChatGPT to write essays, right, and they're only going to use it as a tool, there are other things they can use as a tool that don't bring the same harms as ChatGPT. What we don't get when you're using this is we don't get generalised content that neglects niche topics that are super important. We don't get the loss of culture that comes with ChatGPT. We don't get loss of human nature. We don't get kids not having basic critical thinking skills, right? There are other tools, and ChatGPT's harms do not outweigh its benefit as a tool, right? Now I'm going to move on to like the three main other points on misinformation, how students are engaging, and its role in the future, right? We told you from first and gave more analysis at second how ChatGPT is likely to produce misinformation. Well, all we heard from them is students are likely to notice, and ChatGPT has warnings, and it's getting better. It's not telling misinformation. What we tell you is that students are vulnerable, right? These are children. They don't understand whether it's correct or wrong. We told you they just don't have the contextualized knowledge, right? So what this leads to is students going out into the real world without having the ability to think whether it's true or false, because they just accept what ChatGPT tells them, right? We tell you that also when the ChatGPT has a lack of diversity, like I've already told you in the sources that it's using, because it's using the most popular, like we told you at first, it leads to misinformation in the way that students aren't getting the full story. They're getting the generalised, most popular one, which isn't a good enough base understanding, like the negating team tried to tell you. We tell you that they need to be using other tools that don't have this harm. Secondly, on how students are engaging, right? What we heard from the negating team is that students don't use it to write essays, students use it just as a tool to plan, right? I've already just explained to you why they can use tools another way that don't come out with the same harms, right? So what's important is the students that are using it to write essays, okay? So students that are using it to write essays aren't referencing correctly, right? Even if they use the referencing tools on ChatGPT, they aren't learning the critical thinking skills of, I'm using this reference because I read it and I know that it's true and I'm corroborating sources. They lose this critical thinking. Also, on equitable opportunity, right? They had a major point on how poor people who don't have tutors can succeed, right? We told you at second that now we just see failing students not having any of the skills that employees actually want, right? Employees don't want a student who can put a prompt into ChatGPT and get a basic understanding. They want students with critical thinking skills. They want new ideas. So this brings me on to the last one about the future, right? How it's important. The negating team told us it's important for students to learn to use it so they can be prepared for the future. We told you it's a very easy system because it wants more users. It's extremely user-friendly, right? This isn't a tool that they need to learn how to use. It is something, it's just easy. It's something they accept. What jobs actually want is critical thinking. They want research skills. We can, as Hawke's Bay, we've proved that AI is bad for education and bans actually do work.
Alright, I thank everyone for a great debate and I invite you up to cross hands.
Same as usual.
Well done.
I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, nice work.
Good job.
Good job. That's good. Thank you. I know.